I found my son's drawing in a trash can. Dead in the eye and crumpled, torn down the middle, and thrown out like garbage. She lies to our daughter, not by strangers, but by my parents. I forgot how to breathe without telling me. He said it so calmly, left no forwarding address, was describing the weather, and dumped years of photos, cards, the judge looked like she believed never existed. I wanted to scream. My son Jamie was the one who found something, but he stared at a smudged crayon sketch he'd made for his grandma. I sat there frozen in that courtroom chair, torn paper, while the man who once told me he loved me painted me as a danger to the one person I lived for, my daughter Lena. That's when I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a decision, and now it was my turn to make one. Tell me something. Have you ever been pushed out of your own family, like you were nothing, and then left out of their lives, their plans, even their memories? I brought a video from Daddy's phone. This story is for you. I think you should see it. Drop a comment. Everything ever had to walk away from people who should have stood by you. The judge leaned forward, and I realized stories like this, my little girl had just saved us both. They end with truth. Have you ever been called a liar when all you had was the truth? After they moved without a word, have you ever been silenced in a moment explain to my 10-year-old why his grandparents stopped calling? If yes, drop a comment, or why he didn't get a birthday card this year, or why his drawings, the ones he'd worked so hard on with his stubby little hands, ended up in a garbage bin behind a house that used to feel like home. The truth doesn't come from a lawyer. My name is Natalie Foster. It comes from a child who 35 years old, divorced. Before the courtroom, raising my son Jamie and the judge's stare, neighborhood in Eugene, Oregon. I work in accounting freelance. Our apartment wasn't big, and I'm really good at pretending one bathroom and creaky Jamie's father Dean complained after Jamie was 4. He said marriage wasn't fulfilling for him anymore. Said the pink curtains in 3 states away made it feel like he calls on birthdays now. Sometimes after the divorce, I held on to what I could, freelance which meant trying to keep my side of the family close. Heart is bigger than especially for Jamie's ever lived in. He loved them. Most nights, Lena would lie on her bed, and my older sister in her arms, and ask for 2 bedtime stories the way my mother instead of when I walked in. I always said yes. Or how Clara would talk right over because I had time, but because I knew time with her was the only thing that ever really mattered. On the counter, and Grandma, my mom Diane, lived just a few blocks away. I convinced myself love was an action, not that I could swallow the discomfort. That maybe if I was patient, when I wasn't looking, things would soften again. Like, you're doing better Sunday than you think. My phone lit up with a message, and for a while I believed her. It was from Clara. After Jason and I divorced, one sentence I started something called the truth jar. Would be nice to see you and Jamie. I told Lena that anytime she had a scary question or a confusing thought, she could write it down. Just that I stared at it for a long time. Every night we read to respond at all. Some were light. Almost a year since anyone in that house had bothered to check in. Will Daddy stop? But when I showed Jamie, his face lit up. I answered every single one, handed him the golden ticket to Willy Wonka's factory. But Jason didn't like that. We're going to Grandma's. He said I was manipulating her. No. I should have told joint families don't get to disappear and reappear when it's convenient. He wanted control. But I couldn't say that to a boy who still kept criticizing every birthday how I braided her hair. His cousins in a shoebox. Got furious if I was even 2 minutes late to a drop-off. Said, yes, and after his weekend Sunday dinner, Lena came home. That afternoon, I packed his backpack with an extra shirt. Sometimes she wouldn't talk to me at all until draw something on the way. I documented everything. A gift he said. People like pictures, emails, more than voicemails. He called me unstable. Said I was damaging our daughter emotionally. It wasn't about cold silences. All while Lena heard him scream over spilled juice. It wasn't about that last family gathering because his charger no one noticed I'd cried in the bathroom. But I never showed her those messages. I thought I was about Jamie, letting him feel like he still belonged somewhere. Lena, if I didn't, the day came with that kind of scared around summer light that makes everything look better than it is. She looked down and whispered. We pulled into the driveway. Fresh mulch, clipped hedges, wind chimes near the porch. It looked like the same house I grew up in, but something felt off. Like I was walking into a memory later, I no longer had permission to touch. Jason had filed for full custody, the door, claimed I was erratic, wide eyes, said I lied to Lena. Lavender, said I couldn't provide always stability. Lavender. Reading those documents made me sit down on the floor. Brushing a kiss against my hands were shaking. Like my mom hadn't spent the last year pretending the other didn't exist. She said softly. Jamie barreled inside. The truth. He couldn't wait to see his cousins, but in court the truth doesn't shout. It each step felt like walking into a scene I wasn't cast in. Jason's attorney painted me as a woman unraveling. Mine told me not to cry, the same furniture, not to speak unless asked to stay calm. But everything was too quiet in my head. Like my brain knew something my heart didn't want to admit. Every whisper, that was the moment I should have turned around, gotten back in the car. When I wasn't even sure I didn't know she was listening. I didn't know she was planning anything. Believed. She was just maybe 7, this time it would be but different. She understood one spoiler, thing. It wasn't. It was worse. The truth matters. We stepped inside, and someone needed to hear it. The house was warm, even if the air smelled like garlic bread robe and lemon tea. The weeks leading up to the custody from the outside, everything like living perfect. In a pressure cooker. But inside, it felt like I was walking through glass. Every question she asked, everyone, but never really being seen. Like Jamie disappeared into the den, laughing with the cousins, like nothing had happened. Packed her lunch the same way. Like his name hadn't gone unspoken for nearly a year. but
like
something
we weren't
inside
the
me was
forgotten
cracking.
page in someone else's
Jason's
perfect
lawyer
family
was
album.
relentless.
They
Vera,
submitted
my mother,
statements
stood
from
at
his
the kitchen
coworkers'
island.
neighbors who
Her
barely
back
knew
was
us all,
stiff as
claiming
she
I was
sliced
overwhelmed,
lemons.
emotional,
She turned just
unfit
enough
to
to say,
co-parent.
"Oh,
In one
you're
text, I
early."
told
I
Jason I
glanced
was
at the
exhausted
clock.
after 3
Just
deadlines
10
in
minutes.
1 week.
She didn't respond.
They presented it in court
just
as
went
proof
back
I
to
couldn't handle
slicing.
motherhood.
Each
In
cut
another,
sounded
I asked
louder
him
than
not
it
to
should
raise
have.
his voice in
I
front
sat
of
at
Lena.
the edge of the living
That
room,
became
watching the
manipulative
scene
behavior.
unfold around
I
me.
sat in my
Cliff,
attorney's office reading through
my
the
father
exhibits.
nodded at the
Every
game on
word I had
TV,
ever
but never
written
turned his
twisted into
head.
a weapon.
Clara's
and
husband
Jason
talked loudly
He
about
walked into
stocks
court
and
every
cruises,
time like it was
and
a
not
business
one
meeting.
person looked me in the
Pressed
eye.
navy suit.
When dinner was
Calm
announced,
voice,
I stood with Jamie
smiling
and
at
followed
the
the
bailiff.
others to the dining room.
The same man
table
who
was
once
set.
screamed at me over
Napkins,
a lukewarm
folded
burger now
silverware,
looked like he should be
perfectly
giving
aligned
parenting
glasses
seminars.
already poured.
The court was
But
stacked
there were no
against me.
chairs for us.
Not legally,
None,
but
everyone
emotionally,
else had a
Jason
place.
knew how to perform.
Even the youngest kids.
And I just
But
looked
Jamie
tired.
and I just stood there
On the
waiting.
night before the hearing, I didn't
waiting
sleep.
for someone to notice.
Lena had
someone
fallen
to
asleep
say,
holding Pepper, her
"Oh,
stuffed
wait,
penguin.
we forgot to
and
add
I just
2
sat
more."
there beside her, watching
No one
her
did.
chest rise and fall.
I walked to the
I
pantry.
whispered, "I'm so sorry."
Grabbed 2 folding chairs
Not
myself.
because I'd done something
carried
wrong,
them out
but
one in
because
each
she had
hand,
to
trying
live
not
through
to
this
let the
at
heat
all.
rise in my face.
The next morning, my
Jamie
mother
followed
pulled
out the
quiet,
scarf she
confused.
only wore to funerals.
He tugged
or
my
courtrooms.
sleeve. "Mom,"
the
he
one she
whispered.
called her armor.
"They forgot
I
us."
wore flats
I
because
smiled,
I knew
though
my
it
knees
burned.
would shake.
They
Lena
probably
wore a
just ran
sunflower
out of
dress
time,
that
baby.
was just a bit too small.
But we both knew that
she
wasn't
packed her
true.
pink school tablet in her
We
backpack
sat off to the
like
side,
always.
out of frame.
I didn't
like
think
props
twice
in a
about
family
it.
photo.
Jason was already
We weren't
at the
invited to be
courthouse when
part
we
of
arrived.
dinner. Went on like a
Same
well-rehearsed
suit he wore
scene.
to our rehearsal
Laughter
dinner,
stories,
but the smile
updates
was
on
hollow now.
promotions, vacation
Sharp
plans,
edges, cold
Clara's
eyes.
son winning
He
a
waved
soccer
at Lena.
trophy. No one
She
asked
didn't
how
wave
Jamie
back.
was doing in school.
When the judge,
No
honorable
one asked
Judge
how I was
Harmon,
holding up.
entered the
We
room
were
shifted.
transparent.
She
Easy
didn't
to
say
look
much.
through, easy to
Just
ignore.
nodded at Jason's lawyer
After the
and
meal,
said,
Jamie reached
"You
into
may
his
begin."
backpack, and that's
He'd
when
been
the
working on
dismantling of
something
my
during the
character
car
began.
ride.
They
Crayon
listed
drawing
every
our whole
alleged
family
misstep.
holding hands in front of
My
the house.
freelance schedule,
In big
my
green
late
letters
night
he'd
emails,
written,
my therapy
"Family
appointments.
forever."
They
He
walked
played it over to
excerpts of
Vera,
voicemails where I
held it
sounded
with both
tired,
hands.
broken. "I made this for
Because
you,
I
Grandma."
was-
And
she
they
looked
used
at
it
it.
to prove I was
3
dangerous
seconds,
to my
maybe,
daughter.
then placed it
I
beside
clenched
the
the arms
shoe
of the
rack.
courtroom chair,
Not
so
on the
tightly,
fridge,
my
not on
fingers
the
went
wall.
numb. Just Jason spoke like
Near
a
the
man
shoes,
reading from a script
and said nothing.
She confuses our daughter.
Jamie turned back
She makes
to me.
me the villain.
Do you think she
I'm not
liked
doing
it? I
this to
swallowed
punish her.
hard.
I just
Of
want to
course
protect
she didn't
Lena.
like it.
Protect that
She
word
didn't even
tasted
look at
like
it.
ash in my mouth.
But I smiled
When the
anyway.
judge turned to me
Of
and
course
said,
she did, sweetheart.
"Miss Bennett, do you
Of
have a
course.
response?" The
I
lie
sat
opened
heavy
my
in my
mouth,
chest.
and nothing
Dessert
came
came.
out. Everyone
My
had a
voice
slice of
cracked.
pie. My chest
Except
was a
Jamie.
storm. No one
All
noticed.
the words I rehearsed
no
in
one
front of
served
the mirror
me. I
evaporated.
reached across the
I felt
table and
myself
gave him
slipping.
mine.
Losing.
He beamed and thanked me. My lawyer said
Still
something,
believing that
something
kindness
mild,
meant
forgettable.
love.
But
That
it
night
wasn't
as we
enough.
walked to the door,
and I
Clara
saw it in
handed
the
me a
judge's
Tupperware
eyes.
of leftovers.
She was about
as if
to
that
agree
made
with
us
them.
even.
That's
I was
when
about
Lena
to
moved.
walk out.
When
When
I
I
turned
turned
just
my
one
mom's
more
hand,
time to look
stood
at the
up
photo
straight,
wall.
her shoulders
It
squared
had been
like a
redone,
tiny soldier,
new
and
lighting,
said,
new
"Your
frames,
Honor,
perfect
I brought a
smiles
video from
arranged
Daddy's
like a
phone.
gallery of
I think
curated
you should see
memories.
it." But not
The
one
entire
photo of
courtroom
me,
turned.
not one of
Jason's
Jamie.
face went
Not
pale.
even a shadow of our
The bailiff
existence.
froze. Even
And
the
in the
judge
center
raised
of
an
it all,
eyebrow.
She
She looked at
photo
Lena,
I
7 years
recognized.
old, wearing a dress
Once it
one
was me,
summer, too
Dean,
old, and
and
said
Jamie.
gently, "Now it was Dean
"Excuse
and
me,
my mother."
Lena."
Lifted her
I had been
tablet
propped
with
out,
both
replaced
hands.
with
It's
blur.
from last weekend. Like I was never
He
there
didn't
at
know
all.
I was awake, but
Jamie
I was.
looked up at me.
He
"Can
said
we
some
come again
things.
next
I
Sunday?"
thought
I
it
didn't
might
answer.
matter.
Because
No
I
one
knew we
moved.
were never meant to be invited
No one
back.
breathed.
That night,
And in that
Jamie slept
moment,
with
I
his
didn't just feel the
sketchbook
touch
tied to his
turn,
chest.
I saw it.
He didn't say much
My
on the
daughter
drive home.
was about
Just
to
hummed
change
softly
everything.
to
Judge
himself,
Harmon
legs
leaned
swinging
forward
back and
slightly.
forth from the
Her
booster
voice
seat.
level.
Still wearing
Bring
the
it
hopeful
here.
smile
The
of
bailiff
a child
stepped over
who
Lena
hadn't yet
steady,
learned
as I'd
how to
ever
read
seen her
silence.
walked up the aisle.
But I wasn't
Held
smiling.
out her
I was
tablet like it was a
unraveling.
sacred object.
Quietly
placed it in his his hands. After I put him to bed, I sat in the living room alone. I didn't know when she recorded it. Just me, the hum of the refrigerator, she knew how to use that feature. And the ache of knowing we weren't just forgotten, we were unwanted. Whatever it was. I scrolled through my phone, wasn't just looking for something. It was the truth. And there it was, Clara's post. The bailiff handed to everyone who made Liam's birthday so special, so grateful for our tight-knit tribe. At first, there was nothing, just smiling kids, grandma and grandpa, beaming beside the cake. The floor. Every cousin, every adult, Jason's voice, except Jamie, not the calm, composed version in front of the court, I hadn't even known there was a party. Sharp, ugly, no invite. You think you're so smart, hope, huh? You can make it. Go ahead, tell someone. No message at all. We weren't overlooked, and don't think we were cut out surgically, deliberately. She's pathetic. I felt my hands start to shake. My heart dropped, but I didn't cry. A small gasp. I just stared at the screen like it owed me answers. The judge's eyes narrowed, lips tight. That night, Jamie's voice quiet beside me, almost trembling. He peeked over my shoulder. Jason saw the photo. That was Liam's party. You're lucky I even let you come over. If you say a word, I swear, I said softly. The judge hit pause. Why didn't they invite me? Afterward was louder than any shouting. I don't know, I whispered. Jason shifted in his seat, and I meant it. His lawyer whispered quietly for a moment, then said, Judge Harmon raised her hand. Maybe we can bake him something. Her voice wasn't loud, green and blue. It didn't need to be. Those are his favorite colors.
Where did this come from? Lena
answered without hesitation. He left his phone on the couch. I heard him yelling,
something flicker behind his eyes.
I was scared. But I thought if someone heard it, maybe they'd believe me. Not yet. So I nodded.
That's
my eyes welled
idea.
Up. I wanted to run to her. The next morning, we baked vanilla
wrap
cupcakes
her in my arms
green
and
tell
blue
her
icing.
she should never have
Little
had
hearts
to do
drawn
any
with
of this.
shaky hands and
But I
clumsy
stayed in my
frosting.
chair because this
Jamie
moment,
carried the
this
box
truth
like it was
belonged to
treasure.
her. Like it meant
Jason
everything.
tried to recover.
We drove
Your
across
Honor, that
town.
recording
I
is
didn't tell him
completely out
not
of
to
context.
expect anything.
I was
I
disciplining
didn't
her.
tell him that
She
good
was
intentions
Judge
can't
Harmon
melt
didn't
stone
let him
hearts.
finish.
I let him
She
believe
turned her
Vera
eyes to
opened
him
the door
sharp
as
as
a
a rope.
scalpel. Her
Mr.
eyes
Blake,
darted
sit
between
down.
us,
He did.
surprised. The
Even
judge
though
looked
her
back
car
at
was in the
Lena.
driveway.
Thank
Jamie
you for being
held the
brave.
box with both
You may
hands.
return to
We
your
made
seat.
cupcakes for Liam's
Lena
birthday.
nodded. Her
He
steps
said his
were
voice
slower
small
now,
but proud.
like the
I
adrenaline
wanted to
was
say
wearing
happy
off.
birthday in person.
She climbed into my
She
mom's
smiled.
lap and leaned
Tight
into her
and
chest.
easy.
My
Now's
mother
not a
held
great
her
time,
tight.
sweetheart.
Judge Harmon
Maybe
turned
next
to me.
weekend.
Jamie
Miss Bennett,
didn't move.
do you
I
have
just-
anything else to add?
I just wanted to
And
give
this
them
time
to him.
I didn't hesitate.
She stepped forward
I didn't
and gently
freeze.
pushed the box
I
back
met
into
her
his
eyes
hands.
and said,
"I'll
"No,
tell Liam
Your
you
Honor,
said hi."
I think my daughter
Then
said
the
it
door
all.
closed.
The judge
No,
nodded
thank
once.
you.
No
Then
hug.
leaned back in her
No
chair,
eye
closed
contact.
her eyes
Just a
briefly,
door
and
between
said,
him and the people
"In
who
light
should
of
have
this
opened it
evidence,
wide.
I'm ordering an
Jamie
immediate
turned
review
slowly.
of all custody
He
arrangements.
walked back to the car
until that
without
is
a sound.
complete. Climbed
Full
into his
temporary
seat.
custody
Box
will
in
be
his lap.
granted to Miss Bennett.
And as I pulled out of the
Mr.
driveway,
Blake will have
he
supervised
looked down and
visitation
said,
only.
"I guess
Jason
they don't
stood
like
abruptly.
vanilla." That line
can't
hit
be
harder
serious.
than any
The bailiff
slap.
moved toward him.
It broke something
Sir,
clean
you
in me.
need to leave the courtroom.
Not loud,
Jason
not
looked like he
explosive,
wanted to fight
just
it.
final.
But the video had
At
done
home,
what
he
my
sat at the
folders and
kitchen
emails
table.
never could.
Silent, still
It
holding
showed
the
the
box.
truth.
I put
He
the
turned and
cupcakes
walked
in the
out
fridge
his lawyers
like they were
scrambling
worth
behind
keeping.
him.
That
The
night
courtroom
after his
emptied
shower,
slowly.
after story
Some
time,
people whispered.
Jamie pulled the blanket
Some
up to
avoided
his
eye
chin and
contact,
whispered,
but we stayed
"Mom,
seated.
maybe
Lena's
if I were
head
more
rested
like
against
Liam,
my
they'd
mom's
love
shoulder.
me too."
I
knelt
stared at
beside
him.
her brushed hair from
At
her
this
face.
little boy who had
"You
done
were so
nothing
brave,"
wrong.
I whispered.
At this heart,
She
they
didn't say
deserve.
anything, just nodded.
I kissed his forehead,
But I could see it
no,
in her eyes,
sweetheart.
in her little
Maybe
shoulders,
if they loved
the
you,
weight
they'd
of what
act
she had
like it.
carried.
I didn't
And
sleep
what she
after
had
that.
just laid down.
Not
She
because
hadn't
I
just
couldn't,
told the truth,
because I had
she
too
had
much
shown
to
it,
do.
and she had
Too
done it
many
alone.
lines had been
At
crossed.
7 years old,
Too many
she
silences
saved
had
us
been
both.
weaponized.
We didn't leave
They
the
didn't
courtroom
just
right
forget
away.
us.
They
Lena
erased
stayed
us,
curled up
and
in
they
my
didn't
mother's
expect what
arms.
would come next.
Her small fingers
next
wrapped
morning, I
around the
moved
edge
like
of
I
her
was
stuffed
walking through
penguin
wet
slipper.
cement.
The
Made
judge
Jamie
exited
waffles,
with quiet
extra
authority,
syrup, but the
pretended
echo of her
everything
decision
was
normal,
still rang
but
in the
inside
air.
something had changed.
I just sat there
Something had
absorbing
clicked.
it. Not
Later
victory,
that day, while
not
Jamie was at
celebration,
school, I stopped by the
just
grocery
relief.
store.
I wasn't
Like
even sure what I
finally
needed.
coming up for air after
Maybe
drowning
just
in
a
slow
distraction.
motion.
That's
But
when
I
I
ran
ran
into
into
Jennifer.
Jennifer.
She used to
Not
teach
yet.
Jamie art
After the
classes when he
courtroom
was
cleared
younger.
out, the court
Natalie
officers handed me the
smiled.
temporary
I
custody
just dropped
order,
off some blueberry
plus
muffins at your
instructions for
parents' new
supervised
house
visits
at
a
a
neutral
facility.
little garden they've got. Jason would
Now I
undergo an
froze.
immediate
Their
psychological and parental
new
evaluation.
house. No
Jennifer
contact
tilted
with
her head
Lena
confused.
outside of supervised
You didn't
hours.
know. I shook
No
my
more
head.
closed doors.
No one
no
told
more
me.
unmonitored
She
weekends.
blinked clearly.
And Jason,
uncomfortable.
He
I
never
just
looked back
assumed,
at us when he left.
I'm sorry, I
not
nodded.
once.
Walked
That
out,
night
left
we
my
didn't
cart
go home.
behind.
We
and
went
sat
to my
in my
mother's
car
house.
gripping the steering wheel
Our safe
until my
place,
knuckles went white.
The kind of space
They
that
moved
smelled
and
like
didn't tell
lavender
me,
and soup.
didn't tell Jamie.
Even in the middle
No
of summer,
forwarding address.
Diane made chicken
No
noodle.
goodbye.
Said she needed
Not
something
even
to
a
stir
courtesy text
because her hands
this
wouldn't
wasn't
stop shaking.
forgetfulness. This
Lena
was
sat at the
erasure.
kitchen table drawing in
Intentional,
crayon,
surgical,
quiet,
but not
that
withdrawn.
night after Jamie went
When
to
she
bed,
finished,
I
she
opened
walked
the door
over
beside
and
me
handed me the
couch
page
and pulled out the
two
spare
hands
key,
holding a heart,
the one to the
in her
old house
uneven
they'd
7-year-old
never asked me
letters
to
she'd
return.
written. I looked at it
Truth
in
is
my
brave.
hand and
I
thought,
cried quietly.
they wanted us
Not
gone.
the kind of crying I'd
Fine,
done for months,
but they don't get
fearful
to disappear
hidden
without
muffled into a pillow.
consequences.
This cry
By
was
Saturday
open
morning,
heavy,
I had made
but
up my
free.
mind. I told Jamie
The
we
kind
were
that
checking
releases
on
something.
Lena didn't
He
say
nodded,
anything.
didn't ask questions.
She just leaned her head on
When
my
we
arm
arrived at
and
the
stayed.
old house,
That
something
night,
felt
we reopened
off.
the truth
The
jar.
yard was mowed,
It
but
had
the
been
flower
sitting
beds were
untouched
wilting.
for weeks.
The porch looked looked dull.
I shook it gently,
abandoned,
handed it to
I
Lena.
knocked.
Want to
No
pick one.
answer. Knocked
She
again.
shook her head and
Still
pointed.
nothing.
One
I
note
slid the
sat
key
at
into the
top.
lock.
I
It
unfolded
clicked.
it.
I stepped
My
inside.
voice almost
Empty.
broke.
It
Not
said,
just quiet.
"What happens when the
Empty.
truth hurts
No
people?"
furniture, no rugs.
I looked up. You
no
wrote this.
photographs.
She
Not
nodded
even that
slowly,
ridiculous
her voice
grandfather
soft.
clock. I didn't want to
Vera
hurt
used
Daddy.
to brag about
I just
Jamie
didn't want to be
stood
scared
beside me
anymore.
wide-eyed.
The
I
house
reached
echoed
across
with
the
every
bed and took
footstep.
her hand.
The
Dust
truth can
lined the
hurt sometimes,
baseboards.
I said.
Only patterns
But
on the floor
silence
showed
hurts
where
more.
furniture used to be.
What you did today
We
didn't
stepped
hurt
outside.
anyone. That's when
You
Jamie
protected
pointed
yourself.
at the curb.
You protected us.
Mom, that's
The
not
trash
wrong,
bins.
sweetheart.
I
That's
followed
courage.
his gaze.
She nodded,
Three
but I
bins
could
lids
tell she was
cracked
still
from the
trying
heat.
to hold
Jamie
everything
ran
inside.
ahead, opened one.
So we lay
Then
there
gasped.
in silence,
"Mom,"
and I let
he
her
said,
fall asleep, voice trembling,
knowing that for the
Come
first
here
time
and
in a
inside were
long
photos,
time,
drawings,
she was safe.
cards,
In
fragments
the
of a
weeks that
family
followed,
story
the
that
court
no
appointed
longer had
counselor
our names in
completed
it.
Jason's
A
evaluation.
picture of Jamie on his first
The report
birthday
was
crease
damning.
torn.
It
One of his
detailed
handwritten
patterns of
cards,
emotional
smudged
instability
hearts,
and
control
crooked
issues.
letters. and a complete
drawing
lack of
labeled
empathy
Our
for
Family
Lena's
by
emotional
Jamie Crumpled,
needs.
smeared barely
Jason
legible.
denied everything, of course.
I reached down
said
and
the
lifted
video
the
was
drawing
one
with
bad
both
night,
hands,
but it was
it
too
felt
late.
like touching a
The
gravestone.
judge had already
Jamie
seen him
asked,
unmasked.
"Are we still their
and
family?"
Lena's voice.
Her
This
bravery
time,
was
I didn't
louder than
hesitate.
all his excuses.
No, I said.
The final
Because
custody
family
hearing
doesn't throw you
happened
away.
4 weeks later.
Back home,
Same
Jamie
courtroom.
sat silently at the kitchen
Same
table.
judge. I opened my laptop.
But everything had changed.
Created a folder and
I wore the
began
same
uploading
dress,
everything.
but this time my
Screenshots
hands
of
didn't
messages
shake.
ignored.
Jason looked
Photos
smaller
of the
still
trash.
in his navy suit.
Jamie's birthday
but
that
somehow
went
it didn't fit him the
unacknowledged.
same anymore.
The voicemail from
His
Vera
lawyer tried to
blaming
fight.
me for their
tried to
financial
argue for
strain.
reconciliation.
A clip of
and
Clara's
rehabilitative
Facebook post,
visitation.
"No Jamie,
But the
no
judge
me."
cut through the noise.
I wrote one
Full
email.
physical and legal
Subject
custody,
line,
she said, will be
emotional
awarded to
exclusion.
Miss Bennett.
I
Evidence
closed
of
my
harm.
eyes just
Toward
for a
a minor
second.
attached everything.
Not to
Then
block
hit
anything
send.
out, but to take
The
it
reply
in.
came by
Jason
noon
would have
the next
supervised
day.
visitation
Danica
twice
Murray,
a month.
family law attorney.
In a monitored
Her
center.
voice was calm.
No overnight
measured.
stays.
You have
No
a case,
last-minute
she said.
pickups.
This isn't
no
just
threats
emotional
whispered
neglect.
behind closed doors.
This borders on
Lena's
psychological
voice had done
harm
what
to
my
my
folders
child,
documents
and its
and
documented
timelines couldn't.
validation. She ended it.
Real,
not
tangible,
with anger,
professional.
but with truth.
I wasn't overreacting.
When we walked out of
I
the
wasn't being
courthouse that
dramatic.
final day,
I was protecting my
Lena
son.
reached for my hand.
We spent the
I held it
afternoon
tighter than I
cataloging
ever
everything
had before.
Danica asked. My mom walked on the
Any
other
audio
side of
evidence
us,
I
watching
remembered
every
Jamie's
parked
smartwatch
car
had
as
a
if
voice
Jason
memo
might
function.
appear. We
But
found
he
dozens
didn't.
of
He didn't
clips,
even
most
look
were
our way.
harmless. And I
But one
realized
something
was from
he
Thanksgiving.
didn't hold the power
Captured
anymore.
clearly Clara
We
saying
did.
she's too
That
sensitive.
night we went
She
to
always
Lena's
was.
favorite diner,
a vote,
the one
a
with red
decision to
booths
leave me
and
out.
smiley face
Danica's
pancakes.
team drafted the letters.
She
that
ordered
same
chocolate
day.
milk and quietly
Cease
asked,
and desist.
"Is it over now?"
Clear, firm,
I didn't
legally
lie.
binding. It's safer now, I
Each person
said.
involved received
We still
one,
have to grow
Vera
through
Raymond,
it, but we're not
Clara,
afraid
Clara's
anymore.
husband,
She
certified
stirred
male.
her drink with
No
her straw
warning,
and
I
smiled.
didn't text.
Didn't call.
I'm glad I
didn't
told.
post anything.
So am I.
I waited by Monday
whispered
afternoon.
some nights,
Vera
I
texted.
still replay the
We need to
courtroom
talk.
in my mind.
This has gone too
Not
far.
Jason's face
By
when
3
Lena
p.m.,
spoke.
Clara left
Not
a
the
voicemail
panic in his
a
lawyer's
lawyer's.
eyes.
But Lena's
Seriously,
voice, clear,
Natalie,
steady,
what is wrong
carrying
with you?
more weight
I
than
didn't
any
respond.
testimony given that day.
Because this time,
It wasn't about getting them to
cry.
care.
She just
It was
stood.
about making sure
And
they
somehow,
never had
in
the chance to
7-year-old
hurt Jamie
language,
again.
she did what grown-ups
Danica
couldn't.
called me that evening.
She told the truth when it mattered
All
most.
the letters have been received.
After the
she
final
said calmly.
ruling, something
All
shifted
legally
in our lives.
acknowledged.
It
If
wasn't
anyone
just legal,
responds with
it was
anything
emotional.
beyond full
Lena
compliance,
started drawing
we
again,
escalate.
but the drawings
I stood by
changed.
the kitchen window
Before her
as she
pictures
spoke.
were full of
The
closed
sun
doors,
dipped low behind
storm
the
clouds,
trees.
homes without
Jamie
windows.
was in the backyard
Now
chalking
she drew
a
trees
spaceship
with
on the
roots.
pavement. Kids holding hands
He
and
looked
bright
peaceful,
skies that
oblivious.
didn't feel
I
imaginary.
wasn't.
She even drew our
Because
truth
what
jar
followed
and taped it
wasn't
to her
peace.
wall. Every
It was
night before
panic.
bed she reminded me,
Not from me.
don't forget
From
the
them.
jar. One
The
evening,
next
I pulled
morning,
out a
I
folded
woke to a
note.
flood of
In
missed
messy
calls.
letters it read,
Vera,
Do
Clara,
brave people still
even
get
an
scared?
unknown number
I
that I
smiled.
knew was Raymond
Sat beside
None
her.
of them left apologies.
Yes, I said.
Only
But
demands.
they don't
Clara
let
texted.
fear decide the
You've
ending.
made this public now.
She leaned
Is
her
that
head
what you
against
wanted
my
to
shoulder,
humiliate
said
your own
nothing,
family?
but I could
I
feel
didn't
her
reply.
heart settle. I didn't owe them
2
closure.
weeks later,
not
I started
anymore.
therapy again.
But the ripple effect was
not
only
because I was
beginning.
falling apart.
That same day,
but
someone
because for the
reposted
first time
Clara's
in
3
years,
generations
I had
family
space
photo.
to feel what I'd survived.
You know, the one without me
I'd spent
and
so
Jamie.
long trying to stay afloat.
The one where we'd been
I
erased.
forgot how to feel
Only
safe.
this time it came
How
with a
to be
new
still.
caption.
How
Didn't
to
your
breathe.
sister just serve you for excluding her
Lena.
son? She just
Real
kept
love,
being.
huh?
The internet
Lena.
doesn't forget. Sharp-eyed.
And it definitely doesn't forgive.
Quietly brave.
Comments
The
piled
kind
up
of
like
kid who
bricks.
asks the right question
Where's
at
your
the
nephew?
exact moment
Isn't
your
your
sister
sister
part
part
of
of
this
this
family. One
This is
afternoon I
sad,
picked her
not
up from
sweet.
school, and she climbed
By
into the
noon,
back
Clara
seat with
turned
a
off
frown.
comments.
What's
By
wrong?
3
I asked.
p.m.,
She
she
looked
locked
out
her
the window.
entire profile.
There was a girl in my
I didn't
class
post
crying.
anything.
She
Didn't
said
gloat,
she's scared to go
didn't
home
send
tonight.
a
I
single
gripped the
message.
steering wheel.
I didn't have
What
to.
did you
Vera's
say to
name
her?
started
Lena
showing
shrugged.
up too.
I told her
Not
maybe
on
she should
social
make a
media,
truth jar,
but in real
then
life
after a
whispers.
pause.
Her
But only
church
if it's
received
safe
an
to tell.
anonymous letter.
7,
not
and
mine.
already carrying the
But
wisdom.
someone had forwarded
Most adults
details
take a
about the
lifetime
cease
to
and
learn,
desist,
and
Jason
the emotional
tried to
harm
contact us
documented.
once.
Just a few days later, her name
He
was
sent a
removed
short
from the
email
church
to my
volunteer
attorney
board.
asking to appeal
Apparently
the custody
concerns had
arrangement
been raised
the
about
court
conduct
denied it.
inconsistent with leadership
The counselor's
values.
report, the recording.
Meanwhile, Clara's boutique
Lena's
real
statement,
estate agency
none of it
started
could be brushed
tanking
aside.
on Yelp.
He never tried
One-star
again.
reviews came in like clockwork.
Sometimes when I pass the
Sells
hallway
houses
mirror,
but
I
forgets
barely
what makes a home.
recognize the woman
She'll
looking
help you
back.
buy a property.
She's
Just don't
tired.
expect her to
Yes,
include your kid
but
in the
she's
family.
stronger.
I never asked
Not
for any
louder.
of it.
Not colder.
But I wasn't sorry
just
either, because for
clearer.
once, the truth wasn't
She
just
knows
mine
that
to
protecting
carry.
your
It was
child
theirs
isn't
too.
always about shielding them.
And it was heavy.
Sometimes
Danica called
it's
again.
about standing beside
Looks
them
like
when
the
the
outside
storm
world
comes.
is doing half our work
One
for
night
us,
I
she
pulled
said.
another note
I
from
almost
the jar.
laughed.
It said,
Almost.
"Can kids protect
That
grown-ups
night,
too?"
Jamie was brushing his
I
teeth
didn't
when he
answer
looked
right
up
away.
in the mirror and said,
I just looked over
"Do
at
you think
Lena,
they miss
curled
us
up
now?"
with her penguin.
I didn't
her forehead
flinch.
pressed
I
to
just
her
rinsed
pillow.
my mouth and met his
Then
eyes.
I whispered, "Missing someone
"You
doesn't
did?"
mean
She
you treated
smiled
them
without
right."
opening her eyes.
He nodded
That's
slow,
the thing about
and that
truth.
was it.
It
No
doesn't
tears,
always come
no
roaring in.
tantrum, Just
Sometimes
truth.
it arrives in
The
a
kind of
sunflower
truth
dress.
that doesn't need to be loud,
Two sizes
to be powerful.
too small. I
With a
started
pink
noticing
school
things.
tablet held tight
Tiny
in both
shifts in how
hands.
people looked at
It
me.
speaks softly.
At Jamie's school,
but it
the
cuts
parents
through
who
lies,
used to avert
like
their
light
eyes
through fog.
now gave
Lena
quiet
didn't
nods.
just save herself.
Some even smiled.
She saved me.
One day, Mr.
She
Barnett,
reminded
the
me
PE
that
teacher,
silence
walked
isn't
past me
safety,
and said,
and fear
"Good
isn't
for you,
love."
Natalie." That
A lot of
courtroom was
people would
supposed
have
to be
kept
where
their heads
lost
down.
everything.
I nodded throat
Instead,
tight
it's where I got
because
my
I
daughter
didn't
back.
feel like the black sheep
Not just
anymore,
legally
or
but
the problem. I
emotionally.
felt like the
I
line.
didn't feel like I was losing
the one
her
you don't
anymore.
cross.
I felt like I was finally
That week I
meeting her.
reopened an old
And
folder
if
on my
anyone
laptop.
had asked me then,
Not for court.
what kind
not
of mother
for
are you,
revenge,
I'd say
for
this:
documentation.
I'm the kind who told the
for
truth.
healing every birthday
Even
ignored,
when it hurt,
every
and I raised
voicemail
a daughter
saved,
who did the same.
every photo tossed in the trash.
The final piece of this story
I wasn't
didn't
trying to
come
get
from
back
a courtroom.
in.
I was
It came
building
on a
something
rainy
outside.
Tuesday night with
a
Lena
new
curled
place,
up beside
a
me on
new
the
narrative,
couch,
drawing in
one
her
where
notebook
love
while
wasn't
I worked on
conditional.
client revisions.
One where
She
Jamie
looked up
never had to
suddenly and
wonder
asked,
if he
"Are
was
we done
enough."
being scared now?"
Then
I
one
paused.
night as I was organizing
Looked at
files,
her. I
my
didn't
phone
want to give her a
buzzed.
fairy tale
Block
answer,
number one.
but I didn't want to give
New
her
message
fear either.
It was from Clara.
"We're not done
If you
healing
ruin
this
this family,
family,
you'll regret
but we're not
it.
afraid anymore."
That's all it said.
And not like
I
before.
stared at it for a long
She
time.
nodded like that made sense
My
to her.
thumb hovered
And maybe
over the
it did in
keyboard.
the
I
weeks
could have
that
replied
followed.
with fire.
Lena became
I could have
even more
snapped,
curious, but I didn't.
She
I
asked
let
about
it sit
truth,
there,
about choices,
unanswered,
about why some people yell,
because that's what
and others
silence
stay
looks
quiet.
like. And every
When
time
it's
I
chosen,
answered honestly,
when it's power,
because she had
when
earned
it's the
that,
final
I
word
stopped
without
trying
needing
to
to
say
protect her
one.
from pain.
3 weeks
Not
passed.
because I wanted her
No
to
new
carry
texts,
it,
but
no
because
apology
she had already
calls,
proven she
no
could walk
surprise
through it
knock
with
at the
eyes
door,
open
just
and
silence.
her heart intact. But this time
Sometimes
it didn't
I
feel
think
like
about all the
abandonment.
other women
It felt like
sitting
mine.
silently right
like
now,
peace I had
in
earned
courtrooms,
Jamie,
in
and I
lawyer
started a new
offices,
Sunday
in their
ritual.
kitchens,
Walks
reading
along the
custody
lake trail,
papers
a
they
thermos
never
of
saw
coffee for me,
coming.
a
They're
juice
being
box
told they're
and sketch pad
crazy,
for him.
that they're
No
emotional,
forced family
that they're
dinners,
lying,
no tiptoeing,
and they don't
through
know
old
if
wounds,
anyone will believe
just
them.
wind, water,
I tell
and
this
space
story
to
for them.
breathe. Because the
We'd
truth
sit at the
doesn't
same
always
bench
roar.
near the water's edge.
Sometimes
The one I used to
it's
visit
small
when
and
Jamie was a
scared
toddler,
and 7 years old.
He'd swing his legs tongue
but it
poking
matters.
out as he tried to sketch
The
the
day
birds.
Lena handed that tablet
One
to
morning,
the judge,
he looked up from his
she
drawing.
did more than speak
It
up.
looks like the
She
heron
broke
is
a
flying away
cycle,
from something.
she
I
opened
smiled.
a window that had been
or
sealed
maybe
shut for
flying
years.
toward something.
And in that moment, the world
And I
didn't
realized
get louder.
that's
It just
exactly
got
what we
clearer.
were doing.
She didn't do it for
Later
revenge.
that week, I found an
She didn't do
envelope
it
in
to
our
punish her
mailbox.
father.
No return address.
She did it because she deserved
But I
peace.
recognized the handwriting.
And so did I.
The
Vera,
truth doesn't just protect us.
I didn't
it frees
open it
us.
right away.
And
I
if you're
waited
sitting in
until
silence
Jamie was
right
asleep,
now,
inside
wondering
a
if
single
the truth
sentence,
is enough,
we didn't
this
think
is your
we'd go this
reminder.
far.
It is.
Maybe we
What did you think of
misunderstood
this
you.
story?
Maybe we were wrong.
If you were in Rachel's shoes,
no apology,
how would you have
no
protected
ownership.
Lena?
Just
Let me know in the
wearing
comments
the mask
and
of
tell me where you're
reflection. I
listening
folded
from.
the card in half.
And if you believe Lena
placed
was
it
the
underneath
true
the
hero,
torn
your
photo I
comment
rescued
sought
from
the
their
truth
trash.
is brave.
Let them stay
Because
buried
sometimes
together.
it's not the strongest
That
person
Saturday,
in the room
Edgar,
who changes
our old
everything.
neighbor, stopped by with
It's
sugar
the quietest
cookies for
one,
Jamie, with nothing
same
but
sweater,
courage in her chest,
same dry jokes,
and truth in her
same
hands.
quiet loyalty.
I used
He
to
never
think being
asked
a
about
good mother
Vera.
meant
He
hiding
didn't
the
have
hard
to.
parts, shielding my daughter
Instead,
from
he
every
challenged
sharp
Jamie
edge.
to a game of chess.
Now I know
lost
being
on
a good
purpose.
mother means standing
Again,
beside
Jamie
her through the
laughed.
storm
You
and
always
teaching
let
her
me win.
that her voice
Edgar winked.
matters.
Or
even
maybe
when
you're
it's
just
getting too sharp
even
for
when
me,
the room
that
tries
was
to
family.
silence it.
We still
Simple,
have
soft
tough days.
No proof required.
But fear doesn't define us anymore.
The next day I went back
Jason
to
doesn't
therapy
define
for the
us.
first time in
We
years.
are loud when we need to
After
be quiet.
I told my
when
story,
we choose to be.
the therapist said
and most
something
of all,
I'll
we
never
are free.
forget.
If this
What
story
they did
moved
wasn't
you, share it
personal,
with someone
but
who
your
needs
healing
to hear
has
it.
to be.
And don't forget
And
to
that's when I
subscribe
knew
to
I wasn't
Reddit
doing this to
story
get
for
them
more
back.
real, raw, and
I was
powerful
doing it to
stories
build
like
something
this.
better.
Every single day.
Not bigger,
Stay
not
brave,
louder,
just
stay
safer,
kind.
for Jamie.
And
For
never
me.
forget
For
the truth
whatever
matters.
comes next. That night, Jamie curled into bed, his stuffed penguin under one arm. As I tucked the blanket around his shoulders, he looked up at me and asked, "Do you think they still think about us?" I didn't pause, didn't flinch. Maybe I said, "But thinking about someone doesn't fix what they did to you." He nodded once, eyelids heavy. "I'm glad it's just us now." I kissed his forehead. "Me too, baby. Me too." And I meant it, because I didn't lose a family. I escaped one. And we're not broken. We're building. If you're listening to this and you've ever been the quiet one in the room, the one who stayed soft just to keep the peace, the one erased in silence, silence instead of anger. Hear me now, you don't owe anyone access to you just because they share your blood. You owe yourself peace and your children safety. Sometimes healing doesn't look like forgiveness. Sometimes it looks like a locked door. And finally, walking away. What about you? Have you ever had to walk away from someone who was supposed to protect you? Let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from and what helped you heal? And if stories like this speak to something deep inside, you make sure to subscribe to EN Reddit Story because your silence was never weakness. It was just waiting for the right time to speak. And maybe that time is now.